Sure. If you're ready, then yeah, we'll be able to go.
Okay, thank you. I don't know a proper backdrop. Just noticed.
I had the same problem this morning. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I just went on to blur.
I think it's the way we've had to come in. Anyway. Are we live now, Karen?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good morning everyone and welcome to this meeting of the Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee on the 7th of November 2023. We're waiting for one board member to join us, having difficulties with the IT this morning, but I think quite a few of us are, so I'm sure Katerina will join us just as soon as she can. In the meantime, do we have any apologies? There are none intimated to me, and I think all the board members are here once Katerina joins us. Are there any declarations of interest?
No.
Oh, thank you very much.
Mary, Alan Spears has us, yeah.
DCC Spears?
Apologies, Chair. I was just looking for the window of opportunity. I know it's not an apology, but I just wanted to note that Sarah McKenzie has joined us this morning. Sarah is the new risk manager within Police Scotland. She was previously a risk officer some time ago, but this is obviously her first meeting in her new role, which she's literally only started 5 minutes ago, and she'll present the risk paper later in the day.
Well, that's a baptism of fire, Sarah, but you're most welcome. We'll look forward to hearing from you when we get to item 7. So, yeah, thank you very much, DCC, for that. Okay, do we have any no declarations of interest? We're moving then to item 1.3, which is the minute of the meeting that we held on the 2nd of August. That minute is there for your approval as a true record. Everybody content with that?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Item 1.4 then is the action log with matters arising, and we've got 4 actions which are ongoing, and the intention is that these will come back to us at the next meeting in February, and we have 1 proposed for closure. Is everybody comfortable with that?
Yes.
That's super, thank you very much. Moving on then to item 1.5, which relates to the potential for certain items to be taken in private. We're asking today for members to consider taking items 6, 7 and 8 in private. Is everybody happy with that? Okay, thank you very much. Moving to the first substantive item of business then, item 2.1. This is under the heading of Audit and Improvement Progress, and this is the internal audit update, and we have a report from the Risk and Advisory Services Director at BDO. Handing over to you.
You're on mute, Claire.
Claire.
Sorry. The progress report just confirms that the plan is progressing as planned and no exceptions to report in this period.
Thank you very much. I think it's a very comprehensive report, so thank you for that. And I think it would appear from what you're telling us that there's a robust approach to following up and tracking, so that's much to be welcomed. Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions for Claire? Grant.
Sorry, it's not a question. It was really just to say I found the report very easy to follow and well presented. So it's very clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, I would agree with that, Grant. Very, very easy to read. So thank you very much. We look forward to the report every quarter. So thank you, Claire. Moving then to item 2.2. which is the Police Scotland Audit and Improvement Recommendation Tracker for Q2, and a progress note on how matters are being taken forward. And we have for this one DCC Spears.
Thanks very much, Chair. Morning, folks. I'll just maybe say a few words of introduction, then I'll turn to my expert who's in the room, and Donna will just take us through some more of the detail that's contained within the report. You will see from the information provided that we currently have 226 recommendations which are open, and that is an increase of 77 in the last quarter. I think in my experience over the last 5 or 6 years, that's probably as many recommendations as I can recall being open. What I would say is it's probably reflective of the volume and range of scrutiny that's ongoing within the organisation just now. And I guess quite positively, 80% of all those recommendations are in and around the last 12 months, which again is reflective of the volume of inspections and audits that have taken place. We have only closed 26 in the last quarter, and I've had a close look at that, and that is probably on a par with what we would generally close as we go through each of those quarters. What I would suggest is that in the last year, though, the volume of recommendations has increased by something like 150-odd%. So really busy. And with that, a couple of comments of introduction, Chair, I'm just going to turn to Donna, if that's okay, and she'll draw a couple of highlights from the report, and then collectively we'll take any questions that you and the board have.
Yep. Thank you very much, DCC. Yes, passing over to Donna then. Hello.
Morning, everyone. Thanks very much for that introduction. As the DCC says, we've got 226 open, which is the highest that we have had for a long time, and that is split across 39 publications. And we've got 12% of those recommendations that have a very high or a high risk status. So we pay particular attention to those when we are reviewing progress. Overall, 78% of the ongoing recommendations are on track, and what I usually provide is a detail of all of those that are delayed. So that amounts to 50 recommendations which have incurred delays or have had to be reprioritised, and that is an increase from the last report, and it's a growing sort of trend over the last few months that we have seen that number increasing. There's been 20 new recommendations that were reported as delayed this quarter, and they are provided within the slide deck that you've been provided with as a new delay. So every time there's a new delay, we provide you with the detail of that delay and why it has been delayed, so you can see that for yourself. 10% of all the delays have a very high or a high risk status, so we interrogate those quite closely. And half of the delays relate to HMICS activity. We don't usually have as high delays with the internal audits, I would say. I think this is quite exceptional, but we have got some of the organisational learning recommendations, which is brand new activity for the organisation to implement rather than focusing on areas of non-compliance. So that amounts to 8 of those recommendations that fell, that were delayed this quarter. In relation to the reasons why they are delayed, I would say there's probably a variety. There's no single reason why they're delayed. And I would say that we possibly don't we are ambitious with our timescales, rightly so, I think, at times, but we maybe don't take account of the complexity or the interdependencies or the linkages to some other work. And what we're doing, and we have done in the last couple of months within my team, is that we've been looking at our action planning template to make sure that we are building in consideration of the impact. So what impact does this have on resourcing, IT, finance, so that we can assess all the things that could get in the way or we need to address this. We're also looking at the alignment. So how does it fit with our objectives? What interdependencies does this have? What's going to get in the way of its delivery? And we're also just sort of generally hoping that that will come through in a more realistic timescale that we can better articulate within our action plan. Now, we're trialling this process with the HMICS vetting and mental health action plan, so hopefully in the future we'll start to see that there's an improvement and more consideration of the timescales. So hopefully that will give some assurance in relation to that. That's all I would really like to say. There's detail there of all of those new delays, and in relation to the trends and the themes that we are starting to see as we monitor it, as the DCC says, approximately 80% of all the recommendations are fairly recent recommendations, they either fall within the better practice guideline, which is a continuous improvement activity. We could do something better, but there's nothing fundamentally wrong with what we've got, or we've got an absence of something, and guidelines. And that guidelines category is reserved for if we need to build new procedures, make our procedures more clear, or if we need to develop new ways of working, frameworks, strategies, etc. So those recommendations are put into those categories once they're added to our system. That's all I'd like to say. If there's any questions, happy to answer.
Thank you very much, Donna. Yes, that's a very helpful report. We have a question for you from Katrina.
Thanks, Donna. Yes, very, very interesting, very helpful. I think you've already talked about around the area that obviously kind of jumps out, which is, if this is a trend, you know, is there a theme to that trend? And you've spoken to that, and you've talked about the ways in which you're going to go about addressing some of these delays, or this kind of increasing number of delays. So I guess I just wondered if you could maybe, I mean, you're piloting a process to see if there's some, you know, there is a way in which you can actually address this as a kind of totality. And I wondered if you could talk a wee bit more about that piloting. You know, how you're going to evaluate it, I suppose, how you're going to measure what the impact is.
Okay, so we have been working with, we have had feedback from one of the other SPA committees, Policing and Performance Committee, in relation to the action plans that we present. We have a standard template, and it has been fairly basic, and it has served us well to this day. I think it's been able to break down the tasks fairly well, but what it has always done, it's been a moment in time planning and prioritization. And whilst we are encouraging our business areas to reflect and think about all the other work that they have on the go and that they're committed to, it really just is a moment in time planning. So there are other things that come after we've secured all the action in the plan that get in the way of delivering against those timescales. So what we've tried to do is we've tried to build in, and Linda on my team has been influential in doing this and consulting with SPA staff in terms of getting it right. We want to impact assess all of the recommendations, so we truly understand what is it that's going to help get this over the line and what is going to hinder it. But we're also thinking about how complex it is, and most of the recommendations that we have are not just single divisional activities. They require collaboration across many teams, and that adds to the complexity of it. So we're trying to introduce boards where once we've got the action plan secured, we can get some momentum with the action in the first few months, because those early few months are really important and we can get those forward. But once we have the action plan in place for vetting and mental health, which follows this new format, we will get feedback from Policing Performance Committee. We'll get some feedback. We've already had some feedback from SPA colleagues. We've had some early feedback from the business areas completing it, and they have said that it's been particularly helpful, particularly when my team are helping them through the process of helping them make those alignments and those connections with some of the other work that they're maybe not considering at the time. And we'll have a process where we will review how good that has been, and it will not be a single event of evaluation. We will evaluate it based on an ongoing basis, based on how well we think we're delivering against that action plan. But I think we have to be realistic on occasions. Other things are going to come in the way that is going to disrupt some of this activity, because this is an additional activity to what we're already committed to. And what I would also say is those 226 recommendations, they are all the recommendations that we get in, and we act and address all of those. We rarely push back and don't do anything. There are rare occurrences. We usually try and address them all to the best of our ability.
I mean, it's an enormous amount of work, and there's all sorts of factors involved. I understand that. I mean, I think it's good that you're talking about, you know, the interrelatedness and trying to link up different areas of activity, because that's always a problem, isn't it? When people work in one area, as you say, it's a snapshot in time in their particular area, but they need to kind of link it all up. So thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Katrina. The next question is from Grant McRae. And then after Grant,
Yep.
Paul Edie has the question.
Thanks very much. Donna, I fully understand the challenges of having quite so many things on your to-do list. And I totally understand the challenges of individual reports being agreed with realistic milestones. And then when you aggregate in, say, the HMICS ones, the whole thing just starts to get to the point where there's just too much in there to get done. I wonder to what extent maybe your new framework for monitoring, whether it's worth taking stock of all the things that are in the 226 or thereby an ever increasing to-do list, and actually reassessing the deliverability of this rather large volume in a way that prioritization can come right through. I fully understand all the challenges that you and team all face trying to do this, but there's really too much in there to be able to deliver everything with the best of the intentions when the individual recommendations were agreed and timescales were decided on, because when you look at the delays and the explanation, they're all perfectly understandable. It's just, I think you almost need to sort of stand back now and take stock as to, well, where do we go from here before we end up with 250 or 300 or whatever coming through, because every internal audit report you're going to get is going to have some recommendations, and you just can only cope with so much.
Okay, thank you. Before you come back, Donna, I think Alan wanted to come in.
Yeah, I guess just trying to help Donna out a little bit, and just maybe a kind of organisational perspective, Grant, which will partly answer your question. So again, just to give the committee a real assurance that as a portfolio, we are scrutinising our audits and the progress of the recommendations on a very regular basis. And before we arrive at this committee, we're taking that through our audit and risk board also. I think one of our biggest challenges, notwithstanding timescales, is that some of the recommendations, and particularly I'm talking about the HMI, which is the largest proportion of open recommendations, are pan-organisation wide. Quite often have, interdependencies not only in the P&D space but into the ICT space. And I even look at the most recent inspections by HMI, and some of those recommendations, unfortunately, are just going to take a fair proportion of time to deliver against. The notion of, in the vetting space about a re-vetting programme, that takes some time. We meet regularly with HMI and present progression of recommendations, but our experience is that unless we can absolutely demonstrate that we have delivered in all aspects of the recommendation, then it kind of stays open. So we are working really hard in that space, but I think it is helpful that in the slide deck that Donna separates out the internal audit with some broader external inspections, and in the heart of that is the HMI, which accounts for a large proportion of them. So we are working harder, and I wouldn't want the committee to think that in every instance that people are just misjudging how quickly we can deliver on those recommendations, that they're thought through, but in some spaces are just really difficult to determine how best we progress them. So that's maybe a more again pan-organisational view of that.
Yeah. Alan, could I just
Thank
come back on that? I wasn't in any way suggesting that you're not addressing them seriously, not in any way. I was just thinking that when you take the HMI ones, we all require a lot of work. And then you've already got a lot of, shall we say, other internal audit recommendations to address that actually, in the light of the HMI ones coming in and adding to it, whether it's worth really reassessing the whole thing. Now, you've maybe done that in your board, but I'm just thinking to try and actually get some realism into what is deliverable with limited resource is quite a challenge. So that's what I was really getting at. And sorry if I didn't make that clear.
No, you did, and I probably sounded just a little bit defensive. I think what would be really important for us is just how we deconflict the different audits as well. When we look at, we get into 2024, 25, you know, and looking at that inspection and audit plan, you know, at times there's a lot of audits that cross over for very natural reasons. So it's maybe something that when we come on to discuss the 24-25 audit plan, we can have a little bit more discussion about how we ensure that the demands are not overly cumbersome in different parts of the business. But thanks for the comments. Sorry, Donna, I maybe didn't fully answer that, but I'll pause there, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Was there anything you wanted to add, Donna? Are you happy with that?
No, happy with that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, I think what we're trying to do is make all of this manageable. So it's always going to be very challenging. But we need it to be manageable. We need to be sure that the really important things are being prioritised and addressed. So we're all looking for the same thing, I think. Paul, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thanks for that. And Grant touched on scarce finance there, and thank you, Donna, for presenting the report, because it was already a very complex report, but now I get a sense of just how complicated it is for you guys to respond to these, because you have a myriad of demands from different directions coming in from HMICS and from internal audit and elsewhere. I'm interested in how the recommendations from the various, you know, inspectorate and audit are addressed financially. How is that fed into the financial planning of the organisation? Because obviously a lot of these will require some resource to turn that around. Is there a contingency on an annual basis to address audit recommendations, or does that all automatically necessarily have to trip into the next financial year as a case is made? And of course, presumably, and maybe you can flesh this out also, that if something is coming in from the HMICS or from internal audit, that presumably makes it a higher priority for finance than it would have been otherwise.
Who's going to reply to that?
I was just wondering if I see Mr. Gray came in. Did you want to reply to it?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So
great, thank you, James.
Thank you. On the point around contingency, we don't hold any money back when we set the budget for things that arise in year. So the point you made around, well, would it need to wait till the next year? Well, yes, it would, unless a budget holder was able to reprioritise, or whether they were to raise it through the normal channels, through through the DCC. If it is an in-year kind of priority that needs to be dealt with, then that would be discussed on a case-by-case basis. But the normal way in which it would be factored into the kind of budgeting and financial planning would be through this exercise that we go through at this time of year to understand what the budget holders need for the years ahead, and that should reflect anything that any commitments they've got in relation to fulfilling obligations that have come out of audits or other inspections. So it would get picked up that way and would be factored into the pressures that would come through for the following financial year. So basically you're looking at 14 or 15 months possibly for any audit recommendation to be fulfilled. Well, we would always encourage the business owner to put something in place as soon as they possibly could, and in a lot of cases, like looking at my own business area, for example, it would just be reprioritising the day-to-day workload of the staff to go and do the corrected activity. If it required something like a technology change, then that does tend to take a bit longer, and that is, if it was an absolute priority and a high-risk burning platform, then that should be escalated through appropriate channels, through risk registers and so on, in order to see whether that could be prioritised in year and something else get delayed in order for that to come forward. So there are a number of channels where things can come forward, and it is just the case that sometimes if a technology fix is required, it can take longer to do that, but that should be reflected in the timescales that the business owner is putting into the audit report around completion or implementation of the recommendation. So is finance an issue in any of the 10% of recommendations that are high risk? I'm not aware at the moment of finance being the issue that's holding up any implementation of high-risk recommendations. Certainly nothing has come through normal channels to finance where we've said, well, sorry, we can't meet that. And if there was a situation where affordability was an issue, then again we would raise that through risk registers, and we would bring it to the SPA for that kind of oversight and scrutiny. That we wouldn't just sit on something that was unaffordable. We would make sure that if it was something that was a priority, it needed to be done, and we weren't in a position in year to be able to redirect funds from elsewhere, certainly we would bring that up through, in the first instance, Lynn as the accountable officer.
Great, thanks for that, James.
Thank you very much. I suppose this could become more and more likely as we go forward, but it's helpful to know that that's not the situation at the moment.
Chair,
Lynn, you've got your hand up as well.
Yeah, just in terms of the last point James was saying. So a lot of recommendations don't actually involve additional cost. It can be a reprioritization or a focus on an area. And where there is a cost, as James says, we'll look at it in budget terms or in the current year. And that is one of the reasons why sometimes they can't be delivered in year, because we need to look at it going forward. My own view would be high risk. We need to address the high risk ones. That's what we need to do in prioritisation. But it is an ongoing process, and it would come through Business Cases Resources Committee and obviously through the board eventually for approval if required.
Okay, thank you very much. You happy with that, Paul?
Oh yeah, thanks.
Okay, does anyone else have a question? Can I go back into your report, Donna, and pick up the reference that you have to new delays? And I think it's very helpful that you flag these up so clearly for us. But sometimes what we're seeing is not so much a new delay as a continued delay or an extra delay, another delay on something. So if you look at the one on ICO mobile phone data extraction on page 11, that's now been delayed for 16 months, and that does become a bit worrying. I'm not sure quite how high risk this is, but could you maybe say a wee bit more about the approach to that?
Okay, so we have moved this into the new delays because they were originally all dependent on the DPIA being produced and then some other supplementary work, which we have put forward a good case in terms of everything that we've done to ICO in relation to this. And I can see Kerry's put her hand up to come in because she knows more about this than I do. But we think these are substantially addressed, but there are some residual matters that are still coming through in the new report that we need to progress. So I think Kerry is doing some work to link up what those residual items are, and then we can cross-reference them into the new recommendations and work on those areas that we have that remain outstanding. So that is the reason for those being in the new delay category.
Okay, thank you very much. Kerry, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Just in relation to those recommendations, so we did submit the plan to have those closed to ICO last year, and then we received news of the second review of mobile phone extraction techniques and digital forensics. The report from ICO just landed last week. It was delayed because the visit that we had facilitated for the review in our digital forensics hub in Govan had highlighted that actually there's interdependencies between the Crown Office and Police Scotland, and that relationship between the Crown Office and Police Scotland is entirely different to the relationship that English and Wales constabularies have with CPS. So they then went to the Crown Office to carry out a review there, which has in turn informed more recommendations which follow on from the last recommendations, and it's about doing that sort of linear diagram about where one is the data controller versus joint controller, and where the Crown Office then becomes the data controller and vice versa. So yeah, that's very much in flight. I've had a meeting with the digital forensics team last week and have facilitation workshops set up with the Crown Office and our digital forensics team just in relation to getting those recommendations delivered. Just for initial report for that, we received 13 recommendations. There is nothing there that was negative, to be fair. A lot of it was building on the positive work and steps undertaken round about getting the ISO accreditation at the hubs, etc. So, but I will provide a report for the next meeting. It was just too short timescales to turn it around for this one, sorry.
No, that's fine. Thank you, Kerry. I think what you've done there is perfectly illustrate the complexity and the interdependencies that we encounter as we look at all of these. So that was really helpful. And I think what we're trying to do is ensure that the high risk areas are prioritised. As time gets more precious and resources get more constrained, we need to focus on that. We need to be sure that we're not seeking perfection everywhere, but that we're trying to get to a situation where we can persuade someone to discharge the recommendation, because we've done everything that we reasonably can, or you've done everything you reasonably can. Anyway, if there are no other questions, nothing else, don't see any hands up. We can move on then to the next item, which is item 2.3, the SPA's audit and improvement recommendation update. Handing over to John, is it?
Well, thanks, Chair.
Yep. Sorry, I've got a split screen today. I can't see everybody, so I'm darting backwards and forwards between screens. Apologies.
No problem at all, Chair. First part of our report is our usual progress on our SPA corporate strategy. So this is at quarter 2. So for the last quarter, we've achieved 72% of our actions on time, on target, and combined with the first quarter of a year, overall, that's 81% of our milestones achieved to date. So that performance is not quite as strong as we've had in the past. It's still good. But what this really reflects, and you see in the report, is we're seeing some of the impact of our resourcing pressures within SPA corporate. So we have had a recruitment freeze in place since 2022, and more recently we are having some staff who have left the organisation or have also leaving on maternity leave for a period of time, and that's really just starting to have an impact on the amount of our milestones in our corporate strategy that we've been able to achieve. So we're doing a little bit of work to look at where are the highest risks and what we need to prioritise and what we just can't do within this financial year. We're still always committing to do everything in our corporate plan, but it may have to slip slightly depending on how much of a priority and how much of a risk each of those individual milestones are. Second part of the report is our usual update on the SPA's own recommendations and tracking. So we've made some good progress over the last quarter, closing 5 HMICS recommendations. There is a new HMICS report which just hasn't made it quite in time. That's on mental health. And we have some new recommendations for SPA that will be reflected in next quarter's report. And at the very last point to say, we have our outstanding ICO recommendations. So we will see later on in the agenda, there's an ICO report for Police Scotland. All of the outstanding recommendations that are here for SPA corporate have been mirrored in that report. What we are looking at doing is effectively subsuming these ones into the overall recommendations that Police Scotland has. Effectively, those will in the closure of those reports will happen for the entire service. There are changes that will have to be made to hardware and software registers, which will happen for all Scotland, including SPA. So going forward, we'll agree a plan with that and expectations that we close these and subsume them within the overarching police recommendations, which we can talk about later on in the agenda when we get to that. That's all I was going to say on this report. I'm happy to take any more questions, Chair.
Thank you, John. Any questions from members? Grant.
Thanks, Mary. John, I wonder if you could put a little bit more explanation on the one recommendation from HMICS that you've asked, you propose be set aside, the review of the forensics toxicology provision. And maybe that's something that Paul's much better tuned into than I am from his role as chair of the forensics, but I didn't quite understand why it was being set aside. Proposed to be set aside, I should say. That's on slide 3.
Yes. Chair, I might have to come back to you on that one unless Graham Stickle is able to provide a bit more context. Graham?
Graham, are you able to help us here?
A wee bit perhaps. It's a longer term recommendation, so SPA Corporate and HMICS have been engaging on it, but further detail I don't have to hand, but there has been communication between the Deputy Chief Exec of SPA and HMICS regarding the recommendation, and that is ongoing. But I would have to pause and go back for further detail than that, Chair.
I mean, certainly, if you're talking about deferring the recommendation, that's one thing. Setting it aside is something slightly different. So I think it would be helpful to have some degree of clarity so we can better understand why you want it to be set aside.
Yeah. John, you want
Sorry,
to come
Chair,
back?
can I just ask, slide 3, what is that in relation to? Because I can't find anything in. Is that page 3 of the covering report or the appendix?
No, it's appendix. Sorry, Paul. It's appendix B, slide 3.
Yeah. Thanks.
Almost at the very end of the complete actions section, the final bullet there.
Ah, yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
Grant, if I may, we have quite a detailed process with HMICS whenever we're closing recommendations, or in this case, where we're looking to effectively change the recommendation because it's out of date or time circumstances have moved on. We will need to submit information, and they're going to have to agree that what's happened now has moved on, or that we're still addressing the original risk. There's quite a high bar to do that. And hopefully by the time we come back to you for next quarter, we can give you a bit more information on what's happened, and hopefully a conclusion that HMICS have been happy with our proposed solution, or not, indeed. And we need to revisit that again. But be happy to bring you back more information on that.
Right, thank you. That would be very helpful, because I'm sure HMICS will have a commentary on all implementation of all the recommendations. So being quite sure that everybody understands where we are on this would be helpful.
Yes, Paul.
Chair, is this the? I'm still struggling to find it. Is this the one in the report template?
It's the slide that slide 3, and it's headed up further detail on progress.
I'm sorry about this, because I might be able to help. Yeah, I might be able to help from my recollection. Sorry, quality assurance progress, not the last one on page 8.
No, this is on
it's the one headed up.
Appendix
Further
B.
detail on progress.
Yeah.
The last page of the report.
Yeah.
So I've got the executive summary, but it's above that.
No, I think you perhaps you need to be in Appendix B, Paul. The very end slide. Slide 3.
I'm really sorry about this, folks.
If you look at the very last page of this report, the very last page,
the details, right?
And it's headed further detail and progress, and then on the right-hand side there are bullet points, and just underneath that is the one where, as Grant said, is the proposal is that one of the recommendations be set aside.
Right.
And I think what we're hearing is that that's still under discussion, so it's a live question at the moment. It's still our proposal that it could be set aside, and we'll get a report back to the next meeting, if not before, on what the outcome
sorry
of
about
that
this.
discussion.
I'll let officers deal with that, because that's the proper way of doing it, and I'm sorry for throwing chaos into everything.
Not at all. It's hard to find your way around it sometimes. Okay, so Lynn, you wanted to come in.
Chair, if I may suggest, I would like us to get a note to members before the next meeting on exactly what this is about, if we may. If taking it forward, we'll get back to you out with the meeting.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine there's good reason for asking for this to be set aside, and we'd just be interested to know what the thinking is. Okay, thank you very much for that, Lynn. Any further questions on this report? I think we're beginning to see the slowdown on some things that might happen because of the slowdown on being able to fill vacant posts and the recruitment freeze. So, we'll have more of the same going forward, I'm sure. But as John said, this is about then prioritising what can be done with the resource that you have. Lynn,
Yeah.
you wanted to come in?
Yeah, yes, thank you, Chair. I think we have we've sort of about 10% of staff not in post between not filling posts into maternity leave, which we won't cover. So that's why there's an impact. And for me, it's just a case of really focusing on the real key areas that we need to deliver on. The corporate strategy is always ambitious, and which it should be. It should be a stretch, but it also has to be realistic. And that's why we welcome the opportunity just to brief you on where we are on it. So that's really the background to it. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much. We'll bear that in mind when we look at these reports, so thank you. Okay, if there's nothing else on that item, we're moving on now then to part 3 of the agenda, which is in relation to internal and external audit reporting, and we have 3 internal audit reports. And Claire, I think you're presenting these.
Yes, so the first internal audit report is on the decision-making process, and you'll see we've given moderate assurance over control design and effectiveness, so a positive opinion on the controls there. The main actions coming out.
Each of them in terms of the.
Sorry, I got a bit of feedback there. I didn't hear what you said.
Sorry, no, you're freezing occasionally, so we're not quite catching. So if you could start again.
The main actions coming out of that decision-making report were really around reducing the volume of late papers and then having more of a work plan for board business for each of the committees. But overall, a positive opinion on the control environment.
Fine. So before we go on to the next 2 reports, we'll take comments or questions on this first one on decision making. And this was a report that I think Police Scotland had asked for and was keen to see it taken forward. Katharina.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Claire, for the report. Just in this one, so it's good to see that it is a level of moderate assurance, but nonetheless, there are 1 medium rated and obviously 2 lower rated findings. And just that, that point around board papers, again, I know that it doesn't seem like it's a big deal, but there is obvious implications, and as such, I think it is quite right that it's been highlighted in this audit report. Maybe just a perspective from management, then, because I think there's always historically been an aim to try and increase the timeliness of papers, but I know how difficult it can also be because I produce paper for myself for some committees, etc., etc. So just a view from management as to how realistic it is that that this is something that can be tackled, because again, I noticed that there are some timelines that kind of take us into the next 6 months. So, and considering the breadth of the governance structure and the fact that there are a number of different boards and papers that are being produced by different departments, different teams. So just a bit of a sense check for, how realistic is it, and is there an action plan in place, and just how is it being addressed, because I see commitment is there, but I just wanted to tease out a little bit more about what can actually be done.
Yep. DCC Spears, would that be something for you?
Yeah. Thanks, Katharina. And I think the challenge for us is papers that we're taking into the senior leadership board, and the challenge that we have is just getting them in the right timing. So unfortunately, there are occasions when DCC board meetings slip. So the governance is such that any papers going into SLB will come through the DCC boards, and as you know, there are 4 of them. The difficulty is it's just at times the nature of policing. It's competing demands, operational matters very often get in the way of just how we deliver on that. And I look at my own. I'm on call just now, so we have a practical example. Planning for fireworks at the weekend, planning for protest activity, supporting major events through football sometimes brings some slippage and getting those meetings in place and getting those papers in absolutely on time. So organisationally, we are committed to doing that. We've adopted the sort of public sector target of 7 days. I think at times it does prove really, really difficult. but we acknowledge, you know, the findings of the review, and we'll continue to try and do that. But I think it does present at times some challenges for us in doing that.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. Anybody else got any question on this one? And I think it's helpful to note
yes,
that
Mary,
when the board,
Mary, could I come in?
Grant.
Right, yes,
Sorry.
just maybe
Of course.
following on from what you've just been explaining on, but one thing that has struck me when, for example, papers come to the Resources Committee, they've been through the change board, and then they seem to be to some extent having to be rewritten in a slightly different form to come to the Resources Committee. And I wonder whether somehow or other there's a way of looking at the whole thing from top down to be sure that the minimizing the amount of rewriting involved. I think that might be an ideal scenario, but maybe more difficult to achieve than to say.
No, it's a really good observation, Grant. I mean, our structure is such that the structure of a paper should be replicated across all our boards, and should be replicated within you know, the committees and going to your board. So there shouldn't be variations or significant changes added. I don't know, Kerry McIver's on the call, who's kind of leading on change. She may have a view in terms of just the template and structures, but it's a really fair comment. So thank you for that.
So I can come into here. So I agree with what Grant said. So it's the covering paper. So internally, yes, Alan is absolutely right. We've got the same template that takes us through all the internal Police Scotland governance, but actually as it comes through to Resources Committee as that example, it's a different covering template. So we do have to copy information onto a different one, so it does create additional work. So internally there's one, and I think SPA have one, but actually it's not the same one. So when papers cross over, there is a difference of the covering template.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I think we'd be interested in looking at how we minimise any duplication, so we'll always keep that in mind, I think. And I think it's also very helpful to note that when we first met with, or when we met for the first time with the new Chief Constable, she expressed her own willingness, indeed keenness, to review these decision-making processes. So I think that is something she'll be giving some priority to as well. So thank you very much for that. Anything else on that first internal audit report? In which case then number 2 from Claire is to do with ill health, retirements and injury. Claire.
Yeah. So you'll see in this report that we've given moderate assurance for control design, but limited assurance for the operational effectiveness of those controls. That was largely driven by a lack in some areas of sufficient evidence of the consistent operation of controls, kind of delays or inability to retrieve kind of documentation that supports that those controls operated consistently throughout the period. However, although we have given limited assurance, we were able to see in some of the more recent cases selected in our sample improved effectiveness of the controls. And there were a number of different areas where there were improvements, but I think things like assigning a dedicated advisor to each case that was the single point of contact, and having that advisor arrange an initial meeting to agree contact preferences and frequency really helped with both the record keeping and the kind of satisfaction with the process. So we're able to see that the operational effectiveness was improving over time, and have some confidence that with consistency we'll be able to close the recommendations and reduce the risk in this area. You'll also note something that was, I guess, explained a little bit in the progress report, but a number of the recommendations in this report were partially accepted. We were comfortable with that at this point because the finding and the action have been agreed. It's maybe just the exact nature of the action that will be taken, but as part of the follow-up process we'll be able to verify that the action that's taken does address the risk identified in the audit. So we're comfortable with that, although it's a little bit different to what we're used to presenting. Any questions?
Well, thank you for that explanation, Claire. That was going to be my question to you about this, you know, how comfortable were you with the partial acceptance, but that's very helpful to know that what's important is that we agree the finding and the action and that you'll track that to see that it's doing what it's required to do. So do we have any questions or comments from members?
Mary, I think that
Grant.
to me the key test will be on the follow up to see if the recommendations that have been agreed are working and if there are any further refinements necessary. It's an area where there's been quite a backlog, and I mean it's good to see that the backlog's being reduced and we're now making further progress in it. But it's how it's all documented and so on in a smooth and effective way. I think is going to be the asset test.
Yeah, thank you very much, Grant. Katrina.
Yes, thank you. Don't want to tread on the toes of the People Committee, but I guess my kind of areas of concern are somewhere in that kind of area in terms of how aspects of this work are monitored in relation to things like you know, the impact of certain policies and processes on people who have been disabled or are suffering from ill health, and if there's any data being collected in relation to protected characteristics, for example, or the impact of certain kinds of things on performance and the ability of people to do their job or stay in their job. I'm not being terribly articulate here, but I just have some questions around that whole area.
No, I think we've all got our thinking caps on in terms of how we ensure that the People Committee is fully sighted on all of this. John, you had your hand up, and then Lynn.
Yes, and it is related to what Katrina was asking about People Committee. We have thought about this, and SP officials will be making People Committee members aware of the report and the findings. They are actually planning to do a deep dive on ill health in the new year, and this will be one of the areas that will feed into that work, some of the findings as well as other work that they've been doing. So certainly a focus that they'll get an update on this work. Obviously, ARAC will be responsible for follow-up on the findings and discharge of that, but again, we'll be linking in with our other colleagues to make sure that People Committee has an awareness of progress being made.
Thanks. Sorry, Chair. If I could just again, I don't want to overstep my own boundaries, but I see that the Police Federation is involved in this, and I'm just wondering about DACA as well, the involvement of the Disabled Staff Association. But this may be out of my remit here.
Chair,
Okay,
may I
we'll
come
take
in?
note of all of that, Katrina, make sure that we raise it.
Yeah.
Lynn.
Yeah, thank you. Katrina, no, you're not outside your remit at all. And in fact, you're making links between committees, which is really important for members to do. In terms of this area, this is an area that's been of particular interest to the Criminal Justice Committee, as you know, and both Police Scotland and ourselves give evidence to them. I think Fiona McQueen did on behalf of the authority members, and we worked out a while ago that the monitoring of all this was sitting with the legal committee, and we thought that wasn't really appropriate. It should really be with the People Committee, and that's now going to move because that's where it should be. And we've also made improvements in this. And in fact, the Criminal Justice Committee were awaiting this report. They want to see the outcome of this internal audit report, and we'll be sending it to them. So it's very much a live issue. And what's good about it being at the People Committee, as you know, all the unions are represented there. And the statutory staff associations. So there has been real movement, there's been real improvement in this area in terms of the actual stats, in terms of backlogs, and in terms of employing more special medical practitioners. But it is very much sitting in the realm now of the People Committee where it should be, because then you want to see a sort of look across why these happening, why the ill health's happening. So it is very much a live issue. We welcome this report, and we will be giving it to the Criminal Justice Committee.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lynn. I like it when a plan comes together, so it sounds like we've got this one covered. Thank you very much. Are there any further comments or questions on that report? If not, the final internal audit report today is on biometrics. So back to you, Claire.
So within this report, the main focus was to assess the controls against the new code of practice for biometrics. And we found that the controls overall were generally adhering with that new code of practice. A lot of areas where there's been improvements made. There were 7 findings still in the report, made recommendations to allow effective demonstration of adherence to the code of practice around things like the annual self-assessment and consideration of the strategy for internal and external engagement to raise awareness of the new requirements, and around the strategic priorities and how biometric data is managed in a way that contributes to national outcomes and how that's demonstrated. So the findings within the report should help to drive further improvements in this area, but overall, moderate assurance over this area, and the controls are generally adhering to the code of practice.
Yeah, just generally a positive report, so thank you very much.
Yeah.
John, you wanted to come in, but first of all, I think we've got DCS Chow with us today as well on this particular report, so if you wanted to come in after John, that would be fine. John?
Thank you, Chair. Just a similar comment, I suppose, to the previous report in the sense of wider distribution. The Biometrics Commissioner was involved in the audit with Claire and her team, and then again, we'll be sharing this report with him and his team to give them a bit more assurance that, again, we're taking this seriously, and this demonstrates good compliance with his code of practice.
Okay, thank you very much. DCS Chow, did you wish to come back? Did you wish to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Just comments from a management perspective. We welcome the audit. We agree and accept all the recommendations. We've agreed some timescales, and it's just to give you the reassurance we have 2 posts which we haven't. We're about to advertise in terms of additional staff for biometrics to give us that structure to put in place, and then we'll take those recommendations forward. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you for that, and good luck with that then. It's obviously an important area, so thank you for coming along today. And I think I saw another hand up there. Yes, Grant.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. Really, it's following on from what Suzanne Chair has just been saying about some recruitment required. The completion date for most of these recommendations is end of quarter 2 2024-25. And I'm very happy with that sort of time frame. I'm just wondering, in the light of what we've been discussing earlier on this morning, is that really achievable because of all the other things that are having to be done?
Thank you for your comment. Yes, they're quite ambitious timeframes for us. We have 6 members of staff moving across from the data governance into biometric structure. We should have a couple of, or our head of biometrics and our lead officer role in place at the turn of the year. So I would anticipate that those timescales are achievable.
Right. Okay. Thank you. I just thought, in the light of what we've been discussing earlier on, it was worth asking.
Thank you.
Well, we wish you luck with that then. Thank you very much. That's the final internal audit report. Claire, can I just say again, thank you. These are well written, nice and clear. What I found particularly interesting was the section in each on observations. So it begins to build a picture of how you've been able to reach the conclusions that you have. So I think that's the more information like that we have, the better. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Right. Sorry. Okay, moving on then to item 4 on the agenda, which is to do with assurance reporting. And the first item, 4.1, is the Police Scotland Change Portfolio update. And we have Andrew Henry with us, I think.
No, Chair, Andrew's not with us today. It's myself. It's presenting the paper.
Oh, hello,
today.
Kerry.
Aye.
Yeah, great. So I think this is the last time this particular report will come in this format to this committee, but we're looking forward to your presentation of it today.
Thank you. So I'll just pull out some highlights. Obviously, the report's here, and I'm happy to take any questions on the back of that. So this is just a general update since the last ARAC report that we brought forward in June. So portfolio general update is portfolio is reporting amber currently. It's really due to 2 things. So primarily, and I'm sure none of you are surprised. So one, similar to what was being discussed earlier around our challenges around resourcing. So obviously we've also got a number of posts that are on hold and are impacted by the current recruitment freeze. So obviously that is starting to have an implication across the portfolio that we're obviously monitoring very closely. And the second part that's driving that, Amber, is really around the financial situation that we're in just now. And obviously that is likely to look at how we prioritise the portfolio going into next year. Now, neither of these are having an immediate impact. There's nothing that we're not going to be able to deliver as per the current plan. But I think we're very conscious of, the longer these challenges remain, the bigger impact is potential. So I think it's just to say that, obviously we're monitoring it pretty much on a daily basis, I would suggest. And I suppose it coincides with us starting to plan for what it means for us for next year and what that portfolio looks like next year, which will obviously come through specifically to resources, but also I'm sure it'll come back to this board once that work has been completed. So they're probably the main things that are causing the amber across the portfolio in general. I'll not touch on all the stuff that's in here, but I suppose just key things that's still under the design start for us. So under body worn, we've now got the tenders in, and these are being evaluated. And presentations are ongoing, and that will support the business case that is in draft just now, and still looking to get that towards the end of the calendar year is still the expectation. And obviously that business case will come through all the relevant governance forums. Local policing service delivery review, probably I think the last time we were here, it's had a change request just to move out delivery of the research until March at the end of the financial year rather than the end of the calendar year. So that was a change request that was brought through the governance route a couple of months ago. But that work is obviously all still ongoing. And there's detailed amount of analysis across the divisions that we had committed to doing. The SERR piece of work. So again, there's been some focus around this. So you will remember that Octi was our sort of phase one, if you like. So looking at what that's actually going to be able to deliver now on the back of, obviously there's been some reductions and financial challenges, etc. So there's a piece of work that's ongoing around that, and there'll be a report that's done towards the end of this month actually, which will be taken through the local management boards and then through the governance structures again. And then for the broader rollout, obviously we are out to procurement at the moment to look for a partnership with the professional services that we can draw down on should we need, and should that be the way forward. So we're in the process of doing that. Probably the other one I was going to call out is MC&E. There's a couple of change requests that are coming through to Resources Committee. Obviously they're pretty detailed with regards to UCCP and National X. I suppose just to give you a bit of assurance, the UCCP is actually to add in a bit of functionality around the customer relationship management system, so the CMS system, and it's felt it make more sense to do it whilst we're undertaking all the training and etc. around UCCP anyway. So that change request is obviously coming through governance just now and will be presented for discussion at Resources Committee in a couple of weeks. And also the National X piece. Now, I think we've had a few updates on that specifically to the SPA through various boards. But I suppose just to give you a bit of assurance, it has been ongoing for obviously a while. This is a very complex project. But what I would say is what the Resources Committee will see and be able to obviously have a look in more detail is we actually initiated a piece of work to look at actually the value of continuing this, whether we should stop it, pause it, and what the recommendations around that should be. So we could give some more detail to the board around some of the thoughts around that piece of work, because we are conscious that it has been, ongoing for a while. However, it is really complex, and it's probably no surprise. But we definitely have looked at an options paper, and that full briefing paper has been presented to Resources Committee for their consideration. Desk pilot continues to be really positive. There's a couple of pieces of work that we're I think it says in the report, the must-haves for the national rollout. Again, just to give some assurances, that's an example of that is we want to make sure that where we've got a piece of evidence that could be linked to more than one crime, that information is available, and that the desk implementation looks at that effectively. So that was one of the pieces that we've asked to make sure we've got that. So again, that's all on track to be delivered. Since the last update, again, a couple of main things, probably the biggest one being the core operation solution. So implementation obviously continues around that, around crime case and data migration. So that has obviously been deployed into a number of divisions throughout September. And we've actually got a go live today as we speak into Q division today. So that's all going very well. There's obviously an enormous amount of data that is now being shared across various different, various different systems. But it means things now like warrants and crime. It's a single data pool, for example. And obviously officers and our operation colleagues are better updated, or they can update crimes, etc., through their mobiles, and obviously are better. And that means they're also better informed as and when they attend any incidents. And as we all know, this obviously reduces the amount of rekeying significantly. So, you know, it's, again, a significant piece of work that is, you know, it's nice to see it coming towards the end, if you like, because again, we've talked about this for quite for a number of years now, but it is really significant, and the feedback on it is very positive. And then really, Chair, I'm not going to, I mean, the business cases are in there, change requests are in there and I'm happy to take any questions on them. But the engagement is ongoing. Again, I'll not read through it, it's there for people to see, but the engagement team continues to work alongside with the change team to make sure that divisionally we are going around and ensuring that people are aware of what's coming and getting their feedback on things that have been implemented. And the other piece of work they obviously are involved in is we've got a senior leadership forum that's been requested by the new chief constable, which is happening I think late November this year. Key risks, really, I've already touched on at the beginning, Chair, so nothing else to add, because that is the two key risks that we're carrying. And that was probably what I was going to highlight, but again, happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Kerry. That was really helpful. There's so much in here.
Yeah.
And it's so difficult just to keep track of it in your mind. Even just remembering what all the acronyms stand for is challenging. So thank you very much for that. I'm sure you're happy to answer any questions from members of the committee. Grant.
Thank you very much, Mary. Kerry, thank you. That's a very clear report. It just demonstrates how much is happening. And I note the various things that are coming to Resources Committee in the near future. I know that we're now moving from change requests coming through here to all coming through the Resources Committee. But I wonder if there's a sort of check to be sure that nothing is sort of slipping between the two, particularly projects that have been on the go for quite a wee while and change requests having to be dealt with at the right time in the right place and so on. I know that one or two of the recent change requests that have come through demonstrate that they have related to projects that have taken a bit longer for a variety of reasons, mainly resource, to actually be finalised in time. But of course, when they slip in time in terms of can't get them done at the right time, they often cost a bit more when they are being done. So I really just look at seeking for assurance that there's a sort of monitoring that all change requests are hitting the right committee at the right time and nothing's slipping through the cracks, if you like.
Yeah, no, that's fine, Grant. So we maintain, as you would expect, an overview of all change requests, whether they're, you know, actually just we're expecting them, we're hearing about them, whatever stage they're at. We share that monthly with colleagues in the SPA as well as internally. So, you know, I think we're all cited on where they're going, when they should be due. So none of it should be a surprise, and I'm comfortable to give you my assurances that, you know, anything that is going to move from from our act at the SP were well cited, and you'll see that starts to flow through as of the next couple of weeks. So I think we keep a monitor of them pretty rigorously, to be honest. And as I say, we share that with our SP colleagues as well.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful, very reassuring.
Yes, thank you, Kerry. That is reassuring. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Can I just make reference to
Chair, Katerina has her hand up.
Sorry, Katerina. Sorry. Sorry,
No,
this is
not
me.
at all. Not at all, Chair. Thank you, and
Katerina.
Kerry. Oh, thank you, and thank you, Kerry, for the presentation. As to echo what the Chair has just said, it's there's a lot to take in, and I suppose from a risk perspective, of what's going through my head is that there is this really big package of activity. And you described that you're now thinking about the next year, so there is obviously some more kind of happening, planning, etc. But at the same time, I'm conscious that we are also currently kind of the budget for this year is currently under pressure, and there's obviously various kind of bits of activity that are happening and that are being discussed in other committees and in other fora. But from a change management function, is does that present a risk to your ability in terms of kind of being able to respond to budget pressures for this financial year, and then obviously balancing that with the planning for next financial year, etc. So does the current financial situation kind of generate additional complexities for you in terms of being able to manage change in the way it's designed to be managed and drive it forward in the way that it's designed to work?
So I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think absolutely it increases our risk around delivery, etc. So currently, what I would say, though, that there's nothing that we're having to stop doing that we were expecting to do this year. Absolutely not. Have we had to look at where we are against, our committed spend, etc.? Absolutely, we have. I think the challenge will be that if anyone comes and asks us to do anything in addition this year, then I think that'll be a different conversation. But I think given, obviously we've been working closely with James and the team to look at what are the challenges for the remainder of this year, and we've built in all of those around our thinking, and that it doesn't actually impact. There's nothing I'm overly concerned about currently. Now, if that was to change and there was additional pressures put onto the budget for the remainder of the financial year, then it may do. But I'm not foreseeing that at the moment. So I'm content for the remainder of this financial year. I think the challenge comes whether we, if I think John McNellis mentioned of more people, if you lose more people and we're unable to fill them, then that may become a different conversation. But as it stands at the moment, I think we've got the risk, we're managing it, and I'm content that we should be able to deliver what we've signed up to for this financial year as per the plan.
No, thank you very much for that, and that's really good to have this very, very explicit assurance, which it is definitely reassuring. I suppose my question was also a little bit more oriented towards the capacity within your own change function to do both, that substantial work that I'm sure is required, looking at, how the budget can be balanced in this year, and the planning work for next year. So because I appreciate that they're probably two competing kind of work streams as well. But by the sounds of it, what I'm reading from your position is that the close collaboration between yourselves and the finance team kind of mitigates that impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is obviously an annual activity for us, looking into. We might have a slightly different lens on it for next year, but it's an annual activity working alongside our finance colleagues to look at what the ask is versus the reality. So I think that we're content we're able to feed into that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Katerina, and thank you, Kerry, for that answer. Just check there's nobody else got their hand up. Okay. Couple of points from me, Kerry. One is that in relation to National X, lovely name for a project. I was interested to hear that you've really had a close look at whether or not this had to continue or could be or should be stopped, because that, when you see delays and going over budget for something like this, then it's good to know that a fundamental question such as that has been asked, and I think answered in the affirmative that you had to, you did think it was worth carrying on. But I suppose that makes, you know, it's important that the Resources Committee now has a look at the change requests and is able to consider those before we have a final answer. But I think it's helpful that, you know, that root and branch, I suppose, review of that has been started, so that's good. My other question is not so positive because it relates to the retirement of Superintendent Armstrong from the position of lead programme lead for desk. This must be the first time we've not had Damien at a committee for a long while, and that explains it. He's no longer with us. Can you just confirm that there is a new programme lead for desk? It's obviously at a very critical point in its genesis, so it'd be helpful to know that he's been replaced. Maybe even you can tell us by whom he's been replaced and what's happening with it.
Absolutely. It's always a challenge when our business leads and our programme leads change over. But obviously Damien has retired, so there's a new business lead. Actually, his first day I think is the 7th today. So it's Graham Binney, who's the superintendent who was I think from D division. So he joins the programme today. I think as well just a bit of assurance. The other key, I suppose, you know, the other key personnel is static across the programme. So hopefully that Graham, I know, has already been involved, but officially his first day is today.
Well, we wish Graham all the best of that new role that he has, and I'm sure we'll see him at committee in future, but we'll give him a chance to get his head around everything there. So thank you for that. Give him our best wishes if you don't mind.
Thank you.
Anything else from anybody on item 4.1 then? If not, thank you very much for that report, Kerry. And item 4.2 now is the ICO audit of Police Scotland. And I think we're back to DCC Spears again.
But thanks, Chair. Again, just a couple of introductory comments from myself, and then I'll ask Kerry Harvey, who's the Force Data Protection Officer, just to go a little bit deeper into this. So this is an audit and inspection that I was involved in my role as CSIRO on behalf of Police Scotland. And in the summer of this year, we had two audits which ran together. One was around governance and personal data, which is what we highlight today. And at a future date, the second part of that audit we'll bring back to the committee, which was around mobile phone extraction. What I would say about this audit is that it is a technical audit, and in places goes into a fairly significant level of detail, touching on such themes as data mapping, data literacy, the privacy of information, you know, the role of DPO, the personal data breaches, and as a consequence of the technicalities within the audit, it probably results in a fair proportion of recommendations, which is outlined. And I think what Kerry will highlight is that given the nature of those recommendations, we're confident that probably close on 30 of them will be concluded in the current calendar year. So a number of those are matters which we can address very quickly. So I'm encouraged by that. But just Kerry, in her role as Data Protection Officer, reports directly to me as Force CSIRO, but having overseen the audit on my behalf, I'll just ask her to, with your indulgence, just to make a few more comments on the content of the report.
Yes, thank you very much, Alan. Yes, over to Kerry.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, DCC. So yeah, as Mr. Spears has highlighted, the report basically was a test of our controls against two fundamental strands: governance and accountability and personal data breach reporting, and in the latter being the mobile phone extraction practice and procedures in place, which was a review which I've touched on previously and will bring to the next committee. So during the audit, I'm pleased to report there was no data breaches detected, but we did receive a limited assurance rating for both audit strands for governance accountability and personal data breach reporting, which was really disappointing, as I'm sure you'll appreciate. There were areas of good practice identified, but these are not called out within our report or indeed the ICO report due to the focus being on areas of non-compliance. The recommendation outputs largely translate into there having been an inability to provide sufficient evidence of specific controls during the audit, which will be addressed by the formalisation of process and procedures. And as Alan's already touched on, there's a number of those that kind of fall into that tranche, which are easy to do and possibly the sort of low-hanging fruit of those recommendations. There are others which kind of fall into continuous improvement activities to be undertaken, and there's other ones, sorry, which relate to the role and responsibilities of specific staff members, myself included. So what we did notice was that some of the recommendations did go above and beyond the legislative requirements, and we did challenge that robustly, but were informed that as a regulator, ICO set a very high bar for compliance and what good enough looks like, I suppose. And in their opinion, these recommendations provide the best way for us to achieve that total compliance piece. In terms of the governance strand, there were 43 recommendations made, which have an associated 57 actions. Again, I appreciate that sounds like a really large number, but as DCC has already highlighted, the audit is really technical, with recommendations being tactical in nature. I have provided a summary on the slide deck in relation to those, and if I just go through these quite quickly in relation to their elements. So the data mapping, that relates to a piece that John has already mentioned, I think came into the SPA's audit stream as well, and that's about the update of our information asset register to bring that into a standard that meets the requirements for a record of processing activity, or a ROPA as we like to call it, to meet the requirements of section 61. This is already on the roadmap for 23-24, and we have a new records officer which will be coming into force at the end of this month, and they will be given this as a priority for 100% of their time to address that recommendation. So I have assurance that we will meet the deadline for implementation of that recommendation. In terms of data literacy, just to be clear, as a force, we're absolutely crystal clear in terms of when we use consent as a lawful basis for processing under data protection. However, we do still have some issues round about the colloquialism, if you like, of language, where individuals may refer to consent when indeed they're actually talking about agreement as opposed to DP consent. There's also recommendations from that linked to the data mapping piece, and that's about ensuring that the lawful basis for processing is recorded throughout that. The policy recommendations fundamentally stem from there being controls in place, but the most recent version of reviews of policies and SOPs hadn't taken place, and therefore were unable to evidence that at this point in time, but those are in the works, and the policies and SOP review are currently in the mix and going through our consultation process with policy support. In terms of audit, this was an interesting one. The recommendation is that ICO would like to see a complete programme of both internal and external audits relating to DP to be implemented to provide assurance of effectiveness of controls and processes. This goes above and beyond probably what's already happening in force, and we need to have some further discussion internally around about how we take that forward. But it is something that we are minded that we have to do. We have explored ways in doing it already, and there has been additional resource brought into force for this type of thing just recently in the information security portfolio, etc. In relation to the logging work, I lead a work stream and have done for just over a year in relation to section 62 compliance, and the work that work stream undertakes is going well by and large. I've provided a separate report, I can't remember under what item, just round about the decommissioning of legacy applications, etc., that supports the delivery of that outcome. And again, that one has a deadline of 2026 to remediate as part of the legislation. And the other one was really just about my own role and about resources to carry out the role effectively and independently, etc. And also to update training, which I've already scoped out and will ensure is undertaken at the start of next year. So that's really a whistle-stop tour of the recommendations for the governance and accountability stream. The personal data breach reporting sort of echoes that, in that they relate to policy and procedure training and bespoke training packages for sort of subject matter expert staff, which is above and beyond what we already have in place by way of training. In terms of the categorisation of the recommendation, ICO have done that as urgent, high, medium and low. to help steer our focus for delivery of the actions. Separately, I still have to undertake review of those applying the internal audit risk framework to generate the risk separately, and I'll present that the next time at the committee along with progress updates. In terms of timescales for remediation, the prioritisation level naturally has been factored into the timescales for delivery. We have sort of December this year, March 24 and September 24. I would say that these targets are ambitiously optimistic, but they're also realistic in their expectations. There are naturally risks to delivery, multiple business area interdependencies for some of them, the current resource and financial pressures which apply to everybody, and some of the consultation can take a bit of time when you're changing policies and SOPs to wash through, but the framework and the bedrock, if you like, for those changes will be in place. It may just be that it's slower time execution for the rollout of them. In terms of my focus just now, I'm focused on the delivery of those with a December timeline. You won't be surprised to hear there's 25 recommendations and 28 actions collectively, which are in progress and on track. In terms of the governance of these recommendations, I facilitate a weekly meeting with our Head of Information Assurance and Information Assurance Manager, where the activity planning and progress monitoring against these recommendations is our priority one focus. Thereafter, the progress and exception reporting is monitored through 4Action. Those have been locked and loaded, for want of a better term, into our 4Action system and will be reported to Data Governance Board quarterly for governance there, which is chaired by Mr. Spears as CIRO, and then quarterly to this committee. I appreciate this is a quick walkthrough of what is a very detailed and technical recommendation and action plan, but I'm happy to field any questions or comments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kerry. Open it up to the board for any questions. Grant.
Thanks, Mary. Kerry, thank you very much for explaining what is clearly a lot of work, and obviously implementing all of these is one thing to say in a few sentences, but actually there's a lot of hard work involved. I was actually puzzled to some extent the difference between urgent and high in terms of recommendations, but that's a bit clearer now. So what I was really wondering was, do the ICO come back and monitor implementation, and when are they likely to do that? Because I think that it's something that we'd find it helpful to understand.
Yeah, very valid point, thank you, and apologies because I actually forgot to mention that. So I've actually just received confirmation from ICO yesterday that they will be back to do a desktop review of this on the week beginning the 4th of March. Prior to that, I've also set aside some time with them in December, just as a sort of halfway house for progress monitoring with them to make sure that we're on the right track and what we've already got in place by December is suitable for them, and you know, we're not going to get any surprises in March that we haven't got enough.
Right, thank you, thanks, that's very helpful. Good luck with your discussion in December.
Any other comments or questions? No, I suppose, Kerry, from my point of view, I had to go and look at the report to find out what the assurance ratings were at the actual ICO report, because the report that you've given us doesn't really make that particularly clear. So what they said was limited assurance, both in relation to governance, accountability and personal data breach management and reporting, with considerable scope for improvement. So with that overview, I think it would be helpful if you brought something back to us in February, if you could. And yes. I realise that's before you're due to meet again with the ICO in March, but you will have had your meeting with them in December, and hopefully you'll be able to report good progress. There's a lot to be done, and obviously you're aware of that, very aware of that. I would imagine every day it will challenge you, but we obviously would want to be supportive of that work, but we need to be able to see that what needs to be addressed can be addressed, and that we're not having to cut corners on this. So if we could maybe have something back to the February committee, I think that would be really helpful.
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, any other comments or questions on that? In which case, we're now on item 4.4, 3, I think. Yes, and that's best value. And the first one is in relation to SPA corporate. So that would be Lynn or John, I would imagine.
Yes, I'll pass over to John to take you through the report. It's very important. We'll be getting the HMICS review of SPA corporate in the next few months, and this was background work to that. So I'll pass over to John, if I may, Chair. Okay.
Thank you, Lynn. Yes, John.
Thank you, Chair and Chief Executive. This is a really important report for us, actually. It's the culmination of quite a lot of work on best value. So I do want to spend just a short amount of time talking through the report, really just picking up a few things. So this is a continuous journey of best value for us in SPA. This is the third year now that we've completed our best value self-assessment work. And indeed, it's probably the most detailed that we've ever done this work before. It is based on the Scottish Government's Accountable Officer's guidance for best value. And like I said, we've taken a slightly different approach this year from what we've done in the past. There are 7 best value themes, and we've ran 7 individual workshops with SPA staff to really explore all of the questions and really challenge ourselves on what we've been doing with regards to the best value themes. And in fact, a lot of the time, I think we've been far stricter on how we've been challenging ourselves and assessing ourselves. And we've had some good discussions about what we think, because best value is not quite binary. It's a lot of judgment involved in how we assess ourselves, which has been good conversation. So going into the findings, really, we've seen quite a lot of continuous improvements, especially if you go back to year 1, and in particular, looking at areas of non-compliance. Last year, we had 32% non-compliance, and I'm really pleased to say that this year, we're reporting no areas where we're non-compliant. And I think that just shows you how we've been really focused over the last 18 months on the poorest performing areas, such that now we have nothing that we're assessing as non-compliant. But equally, we're also improving the areas where we're completely fully compliant. So we've moved from 52% last year to 57% full compliance. And in the report itself, it goes into a lot of detail, specifically of all themes and where we've moved and some of the information on what we've done, which I won't talk through in any detail, but happy to take questions on that. But in terms of next steps, what we're really focused on the year ahead is, again, now that we've moved away from those areas of non-compliance, how do we move to full compliance and really best practice across the board? So what we've done is linked all of the actions that we've identified into our business plan. So some areas are in our business plan for this year that we will naturally achieve, and other areas will include in our business plan for the year ahead once we get onto that. We've also selected 2 areas of deep dives to undertake over the next year. So that's performance management and qualities. And in discussions with HMICS, what we're also trying to do now is move away from some of the best value toolkits. They're really useful, but HMICS and Audit Scotland have been challenging us to look at areas of best practice across the board. So what I mean for that, if I just took equalities, for example, there's some really good guidance out there from the Chartered Institute of Personal Development. They're the experts in that area, as well as the Equalities and Human Rights Commission. So we won't just be relying on best value toolkits from Audit Scotland. We'll look at what's the experts and the topic of the highest standard for that area and look at that. So that's been really good discussions with HMICS on our next steps. And probably lastly, what Lynn's mentioned just now, HMICS will be undertaking their validated self-assessment of the SPA. And one key aspect of that is looking at how the SPA self-evaluates itself and continually improves. And a large part of our evidence is indeed this best value self-assessment work that we're doing, which shows you how the improvement journey we've been on over the last few years and how we're taking continuous improvement incredibly seriously with actions coming out of this. So like I say, that's happening just now, and will be going on till February. So this will be a lot of our evidence that we'll be providing to HMICS. This was the very last point I just want to say Although I'm presenting this, I really want to give thanks to the wider SPA team for this work, in particular Lauren McLeod, who's our Audit, Risk and Assurance Officer. And I have to say she's done exceptional work on this. I could not have done this work without her. So I just really wanted to very much thank Lauren in particular and the rest of the SPA team. And without any more, I'll just leave it there and happy to take the questions.
Thank you very much, John. Yes, first question is from Katrina.
It's really impressive, and obviously there's a huge amount of committed effort gone into this. So I just want to kind of acknowledge that, really. So it's really impressive, very positive. The one question I have is so you've done a lot of work in the strategic area, and then, you know, as you were saying, then there's the next steps, and there's the kind of actual kind of, you know, the more actual kind of actions that are still to take place. And I suppose my question is, do you perceive any barriers to some of that? So, for example, in the equalities, diversity area, which you mentioned, do you see any barriers to you being able to implement those actions going forward?
I think we've mentioned it before, that the main barrier to ourselves is our resources, where we have vacancies within the SPA, and that is a challenge. Now, I suppose within our people and development team, which are the main focus for our qualities, we are still fully staffed at the minute. So I have less concerns in that particular area. But like I say, everything that we do will be risk assessed and focused. So although, you know, if I'm looking at our next steps and plans, we've got 69 actions and 13 areas for improvement. A lot of those already exist and are already in our business plan. So it's not necessarily duplication. There are a few areas which are new that we want to take forward. So barriers, that will be our challenge going forward. And we just need to take a view on what's appropriate, what we can do, and maybe what will just need to take a longer amount of time. I think we'll still commit to doing these actions, but they just might take slightly longer to achieve than we would normally like to do. And that's just some of the challenges that we need to take with where we are in a financial position.
Okay, thank you, John. You happy with that, Katrina?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Grant?
Thank you, Mary. It's really just a comment, and it's great to see how much progress has been made, but the way in which it's been documented, I think, is extremely important as we head towards an HMICS look into what we've been doing. I think it's great to see the progress, and John, I think you've obviously led it, but I think you've already credited Laura with a lot of the heavy lifting behind it. Just great to see. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Could you say a wee bit, John, about why you've chosen those two areas for the deep dive, performance and equalities?
Yes, of course. I think these particular areas, if we look through the results, I mean, we could pick any areas in particular. Others, although there was room for improvement, I think we already knew what we had to do. But on equalities and performance management, we think there's room for improvement, but also we thought that there was probably the most value we could gain from those areas by spending time looking at what's best practice elsewhere. You know, other areas, I think we're quite mature. We know what we're doing with the likes of partnership working and governance accountability. We know where we are, but particularly equalities, we think we've got more to gain by looking at best practice elsewhere. So there's an element of with room for improvement, but also actually it's probably a good exercise to really challenge ourselves and see what other bodies out there are doing.
Yeah, I think so. I think there will be value from both of those exercises, so that would be good. Well, you're not going to be wearying for things to do over the next few weeks and months, but obviously when the HMICS audit is done, this work will stand you in good stead, I'm sure, and hopefully there will be examples of best practice that they see when they come along and look at us as well. So good luck with it, and thank you very much for the report, and pass our thanks also to Laura. She's obviously done some very impressive work, so thank you for that, Laura. Okay, next item is 4.4, and that's on SPA public body duties, and that's presented by Jackie McKelvey.
Chair, if I may say a few words first before we pass
Yes,
over to
of course.
Jackie. So this work was done by Jackie with Amy McGuinness and was brought to our leadership team. And I thought it was really important that it came to IRAC. It wouldn't have been on your work plan before then. It was taken forward an initiative of Jackie and Amy. And it's really important because the public duties come in, you know, it's not consistent, and they can come along a number at a time, but they are increasing. And one of the questions I always ask Jackie, who sort of coordinates this area, is what does this mean for us as a you know, SPA corporate? What does it mean for an oversight board? And this is the first time I sort of pulled all that together to show just how we are delivering against these different duties. So I think it's a very helpful report, hopefully to IRAC, and it'll be helpful also to feed into the HMICS report as well. So just with that introduction, I'd like to pass over to Jackie. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Jackie. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Lynn. Yeah, I'm going to take the paper as read and just pull out a few key issues or key things that I think you should know. And this was new territory for us, looking at public body duties in this way. And the self-assessment has tested our new public body duty framework that we put in place last year. And what it's done is it's enabled us to have an in-depth look at the public body duty landscape, which we haven't been able to do before. I first started looking at this in 2018, before we had our new SPA 2020 organisation. So it's been quite a long time coming, and it's been really good to see it to this particular part of the journey. We assessed our evidence and rated our compliance levels using assessment criteria that we were familiar with, which was best value. Because when we decided to do the assessment, we wondered what approach we would use. So we thought that there was parallel best value work going on that we were involved in. So we thought we would take that on board. We think that 74% compliance rate is good with 14 out of 19 duties. However, in the coming months, we're going to focus on performance on those duties we've assessed as partially or non-compliant. And in relation to those 3 partially compliant duties, on community empowerment, we will engage with Police Scotland to ensure there's evidence of timely publication of asset transfers. On the public sector body accessibility regulations, we've got a range of accessibility related actions in our SPA corporate service plan for this year, including launch of the new accessible website. And we think that this will increase evidence of compliance here significantly. And on the heat network duty, this is a relatively new duty for 23. We are currently talking to Police Scotland to agree oversight arrangements so that they can carry out this duty on our behalf. On the duties currently assessed as non-compliant, there are 2, but we are confident that the planned actions we're going to take will provide evidence of compliance that we're seeking. On Fairer Scotland, we have discussed this in our impact assessment working group for the last year, and we're going to set a clear expectation on how we will evidence meeting the Fairer Scotland duty and demonstrate how it's considered in our strategic decision making, and members will probably be involved in those conversations. On the islands duty, we will work with Police Scotland to document the current process and compliance with the duty in relation to the impact of policing decisions on the islands. So some work to be done there. We're actually going to share our approach to this self-assessment later this month with the Public Sector Improvement Forum. If you're not aware, the forum promotes a robust approach to continuous improvement. It's developed its own improvement framework, and we're really keen to share what we've done, but also learn from other public sector organisations as to how they've tackled this piece of work. So that I'll finish there, Chair, but happy to take any questions or expand on anything.
Thank you very much, Jackie. It's a really thorough, impressive piece of work. So I'll open it up to questions. Grant.
Thanks, Mary. Jackie, thank you. That's the presentation document is very clear. Thank you. The one I'd like just explore a little bit more is the Fairer Scotland duty, because I haven't seen an awful lot of reports from any other organisation that have been visibly reporting how they're doing with this. Is the discussion that the Public Sector Improvement Forum helping you to test the water as to how far do you have to go to demonstrate compliance?
That's exactly why we want to take it to the Improvement Forum, Grant, because we do want to see what else other people are doing in this space so that we can tap into that and so that we know that we're on the right road with that. So yes, that's exactly why we think it's important to engage with colleagues out there so that we can move forward on it. So yeah, lots of conversations hopefully going to be had on that.
Good. I can see there's a pendulum could swing in quite widely as to what different people's expectations of this might be. So
exactly.
Good. Look forward to hearing how that unfolds. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Grant. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah.
Sorry, Paul.
Yes. Firstly, thanks very much for this, Jackie. I'm assuming this just relates to SPA and not Police Scotland. I'm, as an ex-Care Inspectorate Chair, I'm always very gratified to read the work that's happening on corporate parenting, particularly in relation to the Children's Act. So that's the first thing I always focus on whenever I see anything like this. So I'm pleased to see that that is being acted on and taken extremely seriously. The question I've got is about the aspect relating to islands, the Islands Scotland Act. And there's a reference to an impact assessment. I know we've had occasionally talked about issues in islands, particularly police accommodation in islands. But I'm interested to hear more about this impact assessment framework and where does that go, and how are we as non-execs going to be able to hear more about what the SPA does in relation to taking into account the interests of islanders?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So we have to report every 3 years to ministers on the islands duty, and we reported on this earlier in the year, and they ask for examples of when we've considered the islands duty in terms of strategic decision making, and although impact assessments might have been done for key areas of work, it may well have been found out that the impact on islands wasn't that great. So I have to be absolutely candid, there isn't a lot of evidence out there about strategic decision making when it comes to policing issues that are going to affect the islands. So that's the area that we need to actually go forward with and talk to Police Scotland and also try and develop a process by which those issues come to you timelessly, so that then when you're making your strategic decision, you have all the facts in front of you. So I think there's some work to do there. Again, going to the Improvement Forum, I'll be really interested to hear how other organisations are tackling the islands duty and what kind of evidence they consider ticks that box, if you like. So yeah, to be candid, quite a lot of work in that space to be done, Paul.
Right. So this is not just the report then about SPA compliance with the islands duty, it's Police Scotland as well.
That's correct, yes. So
right, okay.
Yeah, when you think about so with public body duties, it's a complex landscape because Police Scotland sometimes carry out hours for us. An example of that would be the climate change annual report, which although our chief exec signs off, the heavy lifting is done by Police Scotland. So in terms of the islands duty, when we considered, first of all, what the islands duty meant to us, we figured that from a strategic decision-making point of view, it is policing that makes the decisions that will determine changes to the islands rather than anything that SPA corporate would do, and that's where your oversight role would come in. So that's why that piece of work needs to engage more closely with Police Scotland so that we can set up what the process is and how things come along that you're aware of, and that takes us into the territory of both operational policing but also change and transformation when new things are being proposed to come to you.
Well, that's helpful. It's putting the horse before the cart, is what you're saying.
Yes,
so
that's
very
it.
much for that. Thanks for clarifying that.
Just on that point then, has this also got relevance to forensics?
Yes, Mary, yes, because so a lot of these duties by default, they include forensic services. So what we've done with this assessment, we are now working with forensics probably more closely. So for the first time, they will be coming on board with us to look at the climate change report. Actually tomorrow, we're going to discuss it because we feel that for some of the duties, what forensics does in terms of service delivery will enhance the evidence that we can put forward as to how well we're doing with those duties. So that's just an example of that. So yeah, so when you see a public body duty that says it's for SPA, by default, forensic services are included in that, and we're just going to make it more sort of overt and connected, and that's part of the work for the year forward.
That sounds ideal. Thank you very much, Jackie. Any other comments or questions then? If not, we wish you luck with the rest of the work on this. I'm sure Lynn, as accountable officer, finds it very reassuring. Happy to know that this is being given such close attention. So thank you very much. So last item of business before we go into the private session is item 5. The work plan for the committee. Obviously, we see this at every meeting. It's a live document. Our governance support officer keeps it up to date and will track our progress with it. But it's here today for any comments or discussion that we may have, or if we simply want to note it and note that we'll leave it in Karen's good hands to make sure that we're keeping everything live. Okay, happy with that? In which case, we're now going to take a short break so that we can move into the private session. We only have a couple of items of business there, but I suggest that we come back in 15